Welcome to another What I Would Have Done Thursday, and today I thought it would be interesting to discuss a animation film, or animated, that I don't even want to even call it an animation film. I almost want to call it a animation that tries to be a film because its quality is so unbelievably horrendous. As you can see by the title, we're going to be discussing Foodfight. Yeah, Foodfight. This is on the top, actually, of not just animated films, but on the top worst films in general. Its score is unbelievably low, like on the lowest of the low. It's on IMDb's worst. So there is a lot to this film that not only works to a disadvantage as far as its medium is concerned, which is animation, but it also suffers from a just dismal lack of quality as a film in general, regardless of its medium. And yes, the animation is horrible, which we will get into, but that's not ultimately the only problem with this film. I mean, there is tons of problems. But I think had there been some changes made, ultimately there would have probably been at least somewhat more decent product. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of discuss what I would have done with this. Okay, basically, right out of the gate, obviously the animation needed to be improved upon significantly. I mean, this got a $65 million budget apparently, so if it has that much to spend, obviously the animation should be at least of a better quality than this. It's almost like you almost wonder where the money actually went, or who was trying to put the animation together for this film, because it is definitely not the focus, because obviously its quality is just so low. So I think really what needed to be done here is obviously the animation needed to be improved upon. I think CG would have been alright for this film, actually. I think 2D kind of doesn't make it look as, I don't think it would work as effectively in 2D since you are sort of like advertising, you know, these kinds of brands that actually do exist. And again, they're kind of trying to do a similar thing to what Wreck-It Ralph did with video games, you know, giving cameos to these famous video game characters. You know, there's been sort of this attempt to try to insert brands within film, and overall, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It just needs to be executed properly, and obviously this film did not try to do that. So that's definitely something that needed to really be at the forefront, because you are trying to represent all of these different food as well as cleaning products, and each one of those products has sort of a brand or a, you know, a icon associated with it. So you obviously need to treat this of a better quality. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, already when a Mr. Clean commercial actually looks better than an entire film, you know that you really did mess up. You didn't try. So yeah. So this animation needed to be cleaned up significantly. And definitely could have used some finer detailing and all that jazz, especially if it wants to be in that medium, and obviously with its subject matter, it needs to be animated. You can't do this in real life. It wouldn't come off with the same effect. So that needed to definitely be changed. The plot of this film is also another big issue, and again, I kind of you know the similar pattern as to why certain films are not really as good as other films. It's really all boils down to all of these simple aspects like plot, characters, and just the way the film is shot. I mean, direction. Um, that's really the bread and butter of your film. So this plot is full of things that don't make sense, and there is so much randomness that goes on in this movie that I think it really is hard for me to sum up exactly the plot, and actually, really ultimately understand its focus, because it shifts focus constantly as to who's really like a villain and then who's really a what's really the focus on as far as character. It shifts constantly, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the animation is very distracting, so it is hard to get it's really confusing, because there's not a sense of straightforwardness to the audience, and that I think is not good. So basically what I would have done with the plot is I would have just made it about this. Okay, there's all these brands that exist in this brand world, and I don't know why they inserted people in here. I thought that was stupid, but there's a world where all of these brands, the tuna, the Twinkies, all those things exist, okay? And they all live in this little world. It's kind of similar to Wreck-It Ralph, where it's, all these video games and they live in this video game world. And basically, you kind of provide an explanation as to how the world is run. This film clearly doesn't know what this world really is, so it definitely needed to give us a sense of what this world is about, and what it entails. Basically, it could be, it could just kind of be the world that exists when it just kind of exists on its own. I would say that would probably be the only thing that I could see this working. Like, there's no ties into the real world. It's just kind of a fantasy, it's just a fantasy world where these brands actually do come to sort of life, so to speak. And they have no ties to the real world, which I think actually would make it kind of unique, unlike these other films that somehow try to tie it into the real world. I think, just kind of it being, sort of a fantasy would be okay in this sense. Also, what they could have done with this plot is, instead of it making it confusing and trying to insert a twist and a villain and all that, just have it be about all of these brands kind of coexisting, sort of doing their thing. They're kind of producing their product. Like the syrup has a syrup factory, and they make the syrup. All the syrup bottles make syrup, and all the the tuna, they make tuna, and they all walk around with tuna. Like, you could make multiple of the same, I guess, brand, I guess you could say. Just make it a world where there's all these different brands that kind of coexist and just sort of do their own thing, and they kind of work together and they cooperate and all that. And then you have this bigger brand come in, named Brand X. And Brand X wants to destroy all of the other brands, and claim all of their brands, claim all of the brands as their own. So basically kind of take them over and enslave them, basically. So that would sort of be the plot. And then the main character, whose name is Dex in this movie, tries to be sort of the leader to stop this sort of takeover by Brand X. And, you could see maybe how some of the brands, came in and, they maybe are tempted by the power that Brand X gives them. You could have some brands, go completely against it. And, you sort of create a fight between the two, and an ultimate conflict. And there's tons of different ways into which this movie could have executed that. So basically, the whole entire message of the story would sort of be, not one brand, not one company can do everything. And it's not supposed to work that way. You're supposed to have different people, different groups of people doing different things, because that's how you sort of create not only competition, but you also create cooperation, and you get and it's not and there's not a huge giant conglomerate running things. It's all based upon it's all based upon people's merit, and not so much about trying to gain power or influence. So it's that kind of a message, I think. The whole idea of kind of the capitalist system of people competing, all these brands sort of competing, not only competing against each other, but also sort of cooperating together. Which I think is possible. I mean, I don't think companies always have to constantly feel like the need that they have to compete with everybody. They serve a purpose in that they provide something, and that person buys the something that they're providing, and that's the end of the day. And that's really at the end of the day what a brand and a company is. It's not designed to go over and take everything for itself. Obviously expansion is important, things like that, and obviously you need to put in the correct systems in order to do that, but you also need to acknowledge that your company is not going to do everything, and it can't buy everything. It can't, and this is why too a lot of acquisitions don't end up working out, which I did learn in business school. They don't work. So that whole thing, I think, is very important to understand. And I think this is a really good message to get across even to kids. This whole idea of, one person shouldn't have all of the power, or the power should be sort of, I mean, obviously it doesn't have to be equally distributed. It's not like everybody makes the same amount of money, but the idea is that, there's not a overarching influence within the marketplace. It's full of different people doing different things and doing their own thing, and not having some higher authority constantly telling them what to do. So that's kind of the mentality, and it's sort of like kind of promoting small business, and the whole mentality of small business. The idea that the more you have, the more evenly things are kind of distributed, and there's more choices for people, the more likely you're going to get better quality. And even you could maybe say too, that's why kind of Brand X ends up failing as part of the plot, because they get too big and they can't provide the same amount of real value that initially all the other brands were providing. So that's kind of, I think, the sort of mentality that I think could have worked with a film like this. And it could have, I think, gotten some strong messages out of that plot. Also, characters. Like I've said before, the characters are a big issue in this movie. These characters are lifeless. and just kind of just there's just a lot of stupidity that occurs with these characters, and obviously we need to make our characters a little bit smarter, um, and you know, actually make the characters that you promote, because you'll see like how, you know, the brands on the cover of the film, you know, don't really appear all that much within the entire film as a whole. So obviously, false advertising there should have been removed. But basically, I think there could have been a lot of personality with all these different brands, and you could have given them some unique perspectives and ideas, you know, and it would have worked, I think, well, because you would know the personality of each brand. You know, you would kind of know what they represent and all that, and you could have created something out of that. That could have worked, I think. But the film chooses not to do that. So that's a big issue, and obviously they could have done this in a multitude of ways. But I think had they looked into the companies that were trying to, that gave them the rights to do this, I think they would have, you know, had a little bit more foresight into seeing, you know, what they sort of represent as companies and what they try to provide their customers. You know, what's the identity of this company? What's its purpose? You know, that whole mentality would have created, I think, personality with the brands. But they chose not to do that, so yeah, that's definitely something that could have been utilized that they didn't do. And yeah, I think that's really the main issues. Really, the animation, the plot, and the characters. Also, the dialogue. Oh, yeah, that's another thing, too. The dialogue is really bad. Obviously, they needed to not put in so many horrible puns and innuendos. And they needed to make things way less weird than they were. There was just so many weird and crazy and creepy weird things in this film. Why put them in there? Like, why? So, yeah, I think had they gone with this more simple, but yet I think effective approach, it would have probably lended itself to something better. I'm not saying that it would deserve an Oscar or even a nomination or any huge recognition, but at the same time, I think, you know, the ideas that I'm proposing, I think would have really made things a little bit more, they would have made a stronger product. I'm not saying they would have made a superiorly uber fantastic product, but it would have been, I think, improved upon. I mean, obviously this film suffers from a lot of problems already from the start. You know, I understand how a lot of people probably wouldn't buy into this concept, but I think, you know, it could have worked had they just done some things that, you know, would have created a better way of showing the story. But yeah, due to all of the flaws that I mentioned, they obviously didn't. So yeah, that's really ultimately what I would have done with it. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, be more than happy to answer them. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.